The Ilyushin Il-2 is a ground attack plane that was produced by the Soviet Union in large numbers during the Second World War. Its nickname, the Shturmovik, later became the generic Russian term for a ground attack aircraft. In early 1941, the Il-2 was ordered into production at 4 factories. Production early in the war was very slow because after the German invasion, the tempo was not to Stalin's liking, who perfectly understood the importance of this aircraft. So, he issued the following telegram to the Soviet factory managers. "You have let down our country and our Red Army. Our Red Army now needs Il-2 aircraft like the air it breathes, like the bread it eats. I ask you not to try the government's patience, and demand that you manufacture more Il-2s. This is my final warning." As a result, the production of Shturmoviks rapidly gained speed. Stalin's notion of the Il-2 being, like bread, to the Red Army took hold in Ilyushin's aircraft plants, and the army soon had their Shturmoviks available in quantity. It is also a little-known fact that the entire Soviet air offensive doctrine based the primary focus on the execution of strikes by Shturmovik ground attack aircraft on German ground targets at or near the front line, and most Soviet fighter operations were dedicated to protect the Shturmoviks from Luftwaffe attacks. During the war, 36,183 units of the Il-2 were produced, making it the single most produced military aircraft design in aviation history. The German Air Force had a very similar aircraft in its arsenal, the Henschel HS-129, which had a totally different career path. Despite its blitzkrieg reputation, the German Air Force was not well organized for ground support in the early years of the war. Only a few squadrons were dedicated to ground attack. They used the Henschel HS-123, a single-seat biplane dive bomber. It proved to be robust, durable, and effective, especially in severe conditions. It continued to see frontline service until 1944, only to be withdrawn due to a lack of serviceable airframes and spare parts. Despite its antiquated appearance, the HS-123 proved useful in every World War II battlefield in which it fought. The Henschel HS-129 was the first dedicated ground attack aircraft of the German Air Force. The design was relatively effective when it was first introduced, but its engine proved disappointing and it was never produced in large numbers. Henschel already had considerable experience of designing and producing ground attack aircraft for the Luftwaffe, with its HS-123 biplane, which proved its worth in the opening phases of World War II with the Luftwaffe. For this new requirement, the company offered a twin-engined, heavily armored low-level attack aircraft, with a forward-placed cockpit and useful forward-firing machine gun and cannon armament. Small bombs could be carried beneath the fuselage or wings. The forward location of the cockpit allowed the pilot to easily spot small ground targets, while armor protection for the cockpit and engines allowed the aircraft to survive in an environment in which intense small arms fire would exist. However, there were some problems as well. Unfortunately, service trials uncovered various problems with the HS-129A design, and the Luftwaffe rapidly doubted the type's potential as a serious frontline warplane. Underpowered, and difficult to fly with its restricted pilot vision, it never entered production. Henschel's designers had been aware of the A version's shortcomings and had considered possible solutions. The company eventually chose to re-engine the HS-129 with the French Gnome radial, captured in quantity after the capitulation of France in June 1940. This led to the HS-129B series, which became the main production type. Even so, the planned Gnome engine was not without its faults. Although service-proven by some French twin-engined heavy fighters, the Germans found it to run comparatively hot, overheating problems, especially due to the closely cowled fitting plan for the HS-129B, took time to remedy. Its fuel consumption was also high. Just 50 examples of the HS-129B-1 were completed. Manufacture switched comparatively rapidly to the better HS-129B-2, which became the main production standard of the whole HS-129 series. This version possessed several upgrades from trials and initial operational use of the HS-129B-1, including improved exhausts and a much more lethal armament. Initially intended simply for ground attack, using its forward-firing guns and bombs, operational experience, coupled with the reality of the Eastern Front, transformed the HS-129 into an excellent anti-tank tool, thanks to the heavy armament adapted for it. At first, the Rheinmetallborsig 101 Malawian Quach's 30mm cannon was employed, a single example being mounted in a scabbed, underside gunpod fairing, while its ammunition sat within the fuselage. To begin with, it was equipped solely with a handful of rounds, but later an ammunition box containing 30 shells was standardized. The gun was lethal against Soviet armor on the Eastern Front, and for a brief time the 101 Malawian Quachas was successful against British armor in North Africa. When firing special tungsten carbide armor-piercing rounds, this weapon could defeat the hardiest Soviet tanks, the KV-1 and T-34. The Henschels were important in defeating Soviet armor advances around Kharkov in 1942 and, from then on, the HS-129B established itself as a formidable tank destroyer. So successful was the Henschel in its adopted anti-armor role that the Luftwaffe's High Command enthused that all Eastern Front fighter wings should have a specialized, HS-129 anti-tank squadron attached. Although in reality just one fighter wing, the 51st had its dedicated anti-tank squadron, which was formed in the summer of 1942. But there was an issue with the production of the aircraft. Henschel manufacture was officially terminated during the latter half of 1944. This was in line with the German industry ending construction of several types in favor of emergency fighters to defend German airspace against Allied strategic bombers, and the intended introduction of jet-powered warplanes. The exact number of HS-129s completed remains contentious. Quoted totals have differed over the years. These have variously put overall manufacture at just over 1,000 examples, or the recently more favored figure of just below 900 machines of all marks. What is beyond doubt is that there were simply never enough useful HS-129B series airframes on the front line, particularly the B-2. The fatal phasing out of production of this very useful tactical machine, just when it was most needed during 1944, finally denuded Luftwaffe units of one of the best anti-tank support aircraft, to aid their increasingly difficult struggle against Soviet armored forces. The third problem was political and organizational. Although the Luftwaffe recognized the importance of close support and ground attack activities, there was a major delay in the implementation of specific plans to give this branch of service the necessary organizational and logistical basis it deserved. Part of this problem was down to none other than the legendary fighter pilot Adolf Galland. During December 1941, Galland was appointed General der Jagdflieger, or General of Fighters. This was not a rank nor an operational command, but a leading position within the High Command of the German Luftwaffe. As Inspector Galland was responsible for the readiness, training and tactics of the fighter force. His position also included the ground attack formations. But, although Galland was an outstanding fighter ace, the latter did not particularly interest him, and the ground attack force was simply ignored and not properly represented in the Luftwaffe High Command in the first 4 years of the war. On the August 25, 1944, General Gunther Korten became the chief of the General Staff of the Luftwaffe. One of his first decisions was to create the position of General der Schlachtflieger, or General of the Ground Attack Pilots. So it was not until September 1943 that the ground attack units at last gained their own leadership. The first general of the ground attack pilots was Major Ernst Kupfer, a very successful ground attack pilot and a recipient of the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords. Kupfer flew and visited several ground attack wings and met with various wing commanders. As a result, ground support organization, tactics and communication procedures all improved, but it was too late for the German Air Force. Throughout 1944, there was a steady depletion in the number of available Henschels, due to catastrophic attrition, fuel shortages, and lack of supplies. Then came the end of production during autumn 1944. The last Luftwaffe squadron to fly the HS-129B ended its days in Austria during April 1945 where, just before the cessation of hostilities, its 3 surviving aircraft were destroyed on the ground by P-51 Mustang strafers. The Soviet Air Force did not have jet fighters and ballistic missiles during the war. But they had an outstanding ground attack aircraft which they produced in very large quantities and a simple yet effective air assault doctrine which maximized the potential of the aircraft. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.